Well, as I was watching your presentation, I thought that what the stills do not convey naturally is the tremendous amount of movement and sound and the flowing of liquids in your work, which is far from still and silent. And as a writer, the challenge of your work, I feel, is that it leaves me in a space of the aftermath of extremely visceral emotions. Yet, when I try to approach these emotions with language, what comes in the way constantly is the great distancing effect of the machinery of the work, the repetitive movement, the sound. So it becomes very difficult to address these emotions, which one feels all the time in one's guts while experiencing your work.
I think, yeah, I'm constantly dealing with this problem with representation itself in many ways. The fact that you don't experience the work in a still image is also part of that problem in some ways. And I think, a lot of the work, when I make it, I kind of try to kind of include the idea that there is an artifice involved in making the object and even showing it in some ways. And how do you kind of bring in that into the practice of making it? So that becomes in itself becomes an exercise. And what happens is all these objects in some way represent something which is they become references to something that may be in your imagination or your history in some ways. So I'm constantly dealing with what is real and what is not real in that sense. And what is not real, I try to make it evident in a given space in some ways.
And that becomes like a distancing strategy from the emotions that are released in your work. The artifice and the deliberate exposing of the artifice of your work.
Yeah, apart from that, also allows one to kind of open up a world, which may not be specific to the object that one is looking at in this case.
I remember once you had asked me to read an essay by Baudelaire on the philosophy of toys, and there was a brilliant passage there which we had read together, which says that the child's first experience with art, as it were, is when he takes a toy with an elaborate mechanism and puts it apart, a doll, and takes it apart, and realizes that there's nothing in it, that the toy does not have a soul. And Baudelaire links that with the experience of both making and unmaking art. What strikes me about your current show, which is on at Gallery Ski, is that there is contraption, there is machinery there, but you do not, what seems to me quite deliberately, arouse the desire in the viewer to get behind the work and look at this contraption. There's this wonderful large old door from behind which you realize that at regular intervals there are empty postcards which are being thrown out from behind the door. Yet, and the door just stands in a room, yet you do not feel the need to go behind the door and find out how these postcards are being shot out. And this, I feel, is a very important shift from your earlier work, where part of the contraption of the work was what was put out. Whereas here we look at the net dramatic effect of the work, and that is what we respond to, without trying to deconstruct it, without trying to get behind the scenes, as it were. Would you agree with?
Yes, I think so, yeah. I'm thinking about it. When you put out a show like this, you're quite close to it, and only now that I'm kind of beginning to kind of distance myself from it, and in a way that I can read into it and kind of look at what's coming.
The other very important feature in this show is the centrality that you give to texts. I mean, there has always been important texts in your work, as we saw here. The titles of your shows have always been constitutive and deeply thought. But in this show, texts become part of the matter, the substance of your work in a very direct way. Have you always drawn life from writing for your work?
No, I actually stumbled upon it. I was, like I said, I was talking about that one particular work where I use text specifically in one work. So I was thinking of, using text in a manner that it kind of fits into this electronic, Jenny Ozer kind of that picker text. So that demanded the text to be written in a certain manner. So there's no full stops. To use that form as something that kind of tells the story. So once I wrote that, there were many texts to be written. That just kind of came about, and I wrote like some 60 to 70 texts, quite in quick succession. And few of them are represented here. So this show was like after you saw my last text, that when you said that why don't you work with text, so that's when I kind of began looking at text as another way of arriving at objects.
Yes.
What happens is you kind of gather a certain kind of mannerism over the period of your practice, and I think the role of an artist is to continuously look at it and maybe sidestep it constantly. So I thought that to take this radically opposite position of allowing the text to kind of dictate the object that you may kind of stumble upon through them.
And of course, what texts bring into this current show is paper, where you actually use pages torn out from books to make work. Yeah. And this shift, or one shouldn't really call it a shift because there are other materials in this show as well, but I think the moment you mix up wood with paper and then metal and then fluids, you are in a way opening out your work to a different kind of fragility, which is the fragility of paper.
Yeah, I think it's without boasting. I think it takes a lot of rigor, and over a period of time, you gather this rigor that allows for that fragility to be on the surface. I think it's a lot of work to be able to, keep that fragility or vulnerability, as I'm trying to avoid that word now.
But it's unavoidable, I think, yes, in talking about your work, vulnerability.
To let that be on the surface all the time, and it's really a challenge to kind of constantly watch it, and not fall into things that you're comfortable with. So I think this is something that kind of I enjoy enormously because it kind of throws up surprises. When you don't know how things are going to stand in some cases, then you kind of go along with how it is made, and you're kind of constantly negotiating with people that you work with, and like the work actually belongs to that negotiation, not so much the object in some ways, and the work actually happens through that negotiation, and I kind of ascribe great value to it in my work.
Yes. Well, your work, in a way, to me at least, is like eternally collapsing architecture, so that collapse itself becomes a form of stability, because that collapse never ends. It's a kind of eternal process of something collapsing into itself and then erecting itself back again. In this current exhibition, for instance, there is that wooden, I don't know what to call it, structure, like a minaret, on the top of a minaret, at the center of which there is text. And at the center of the text, there is a motif from traditional architectural decoration, which is the motif of flowing water. There's also flowing milk-like liquids and blood-like liquids in this. So it's this clash of flow and structure which creates that strange precariousness of your work. How do you then situate this in relation to the epics that you use in this work? where the Ramayana and the Mahabharata become like very important contexts to the story that you spin out in different versions in this work.
Yeah, when you refer to it, in some ways it becomes a very static kind of reference.
Reference,
like you
yes.
were saying that you're going to use this epic.
Mm.
I think within the idea of epic, that flow is inherent in many ways.
Yes.
So it's like presenting my story or looking for my story in a way or in a manner that anyone can find any story in there. So it's also kind of allowing for a kind of larger interpretation. And I think it's very difficult to read through that story. I find it difficult to kind of find words.
And I don't think we should help people here in this discussion to make it easier for them to read it.
Right.
If we give it out in the sense, it's like telling them who.
Yeah. And I think it will make you probably go through it again and again. If you really want to know what my story is, that, which in itself will have kind of certain fluidity in itself in that process, like when you begin to where you end, in terms of understanding the content of the story. So I think in that sense, like your reference to fluidity would be, I just thought of it, like that would be relevant.
To just move slightly away from the specifics of the work, as an artist, have you derived most nourishment from art or from other things, like music or literature or people? Because I find even in this work the presence of music almost in a kind of ghostly way.
Yeah, a lot of my aesthetic strategies of kind of arriving at a work is informed by a lot of it by music and cinema as well.
By cinema.
Yeah.
What kind of music?
I listen to a lot of Hindustani classical music, and my hero is Kumar Gandharva, and his aesthetic choice of how we kind of draw from different traditions.
What have you learned from Kumar Gandharva?
Yes, I was getting that.
Yes.
Very difficult, but yeah, I'll
try.
Yeah.
Yes.
The fact that he kind of presents it in a manner that it's completely his own in some ways, which doesn't belong anywhere, and at the same time it is drawn from everywhere, and it can only come from the rigor of understanding all those traditions that it draws from, and I think a strange kind of self-confidence in terms of saying that this is how I'm going to sing it. I think that is something that has been of a kind of pivotal kind of thing that I aspire for in my work.
Do you think he also pushes the limits of his genre
Obviously,
to a kind of breaking point?
Yeah,
and therefore courts fragility
if
again?
people don't know his music, I mean, there's no point talking about that. But getting to know about his music. But also from right in my early student years, I was like made to look at Robert Bresson's films and his way of kind of arriving at taking the emotive aspect completely out of the performance, and yet bring it together in a way that it kind of completely charged with emotional content. So I think how do you arrive at that? How do you kind of remove each object from its context and place it? And a lot of people, when I talk about this, in this way, they say, "Oh, this is surrealism." But surrealism, as an kind of does this as an end in itself. But I think it's much more richer in Robert Bresson's case, where things come together.
Bresson's writings as well.
Yes.
You said have been a very important part of your reading. Yes. Which book by Bresson?
Notes of a Film Director.
Notes of a Film Director.
They are like sutras, like very short diary writings that he writes. Not kind of theory of cinema. So going back to this, so he would not, none of the actors would know what the story is, none of the people in the crew would know what the story is. You would ask someone to kind of walk up and down the room like 30 times while he's rolling the camera, till the time that person forgot that he was walking. He was not performing. So he kind of completely took out that emotive aspect of performing, or creating that.
So
And
there was
placing-
no
yeah.
there was no direct enactment of the emotion
No.
or expression of the
No.
emotion.
Yeah.
The emotion was put together
Yes.
externally,
Yes.
as it were.
Yes.
So again, contrivance,
Yes.
very conscious contrivance
Yes.
and artifice.
Yes.
Mm.
Hope that makes sense.
Well, even if it doesn't, it's something to start with. And are you the kind of artist who gets terribly, terribly alarmed when you find that you have found a signature style and then immediately breaks up the style and then tries to move on to something else?
I'm constantly doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable with. One of the things I do is I work on many things together. So
Mm.
that allows me to kind of hop around all
Mm.
the time and be with a certain work with all my intensity for that period of time and
Mm.
move on to something else and forget about that.
Mm.
So this allows me to be kind of plural in many ways.
Mm.
And I think I find it very important to kind of present that plurality within a show,
Mm.
that it kind of refers to many kind of diverse, diverse places,
Mm.
and in a way that it becomes a very plural experience.
Mm.
Even
For
when you're-
yourself.
Yeah, even conversely, even when you're talking about something very singular,
Mm.
say something called like love,
Mm.
you kind of evoke that through, complete plurality, because I believe that we come from a place of abundance.
Mm.
And to arrive at that minimal, in this case,
Mm.
while talking about a singular thing, if that is called minimal,
Mm.
through abundance. So how do you arrive at minimal through abundance
Mm.
or minimalism?
How to arrive at minimal through abundance. Let's sort of suspend the conversation at this stage and open it out to the audience for questions, observations, things, clarifications perhaps.
How do you choose the titles for your shows?
In some cases, the word becomes a pivot from where you kind of, like for example, love became a pivot from where you kind of found objects and but sometimes I kind of just, it just comes to me and I don't know. And at times I have to look for it. Yeah.
Very often the title becomes a work in your show, almost.
Yes.
It is not a
Yes.
title, it constitutes the show. I mean, with The More I Die, The Lighter I
Yeah,
Get.
so it was part of the show.
It was part of the show.
Yeah.
So, yes. So it's really like giving a title to a poem, where the title is part of the text of the poem.
It also seems when I've looked at some of your works that the title comes first, and there's a lot of works that sort of fit around the same title and the same
Right.
theme.
Yes, yes.
Different people see it differently. Would that matter?
No, not at all. I mean, in fact, I would like that for everyone to see it differently, the way they kind of see it.
Imagination, different
And in
strokes
fact-
for different folks type of thing.
And in fact, the title is to encourage that process rather than forestalling
Sure,
it.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I find it difficult to kind of not to kind of contain it into a certain kind of set of meanings rather than open it
Go
up.
beyond
Yeah.
any limits.
So listen outside this house. That's the title of the current show,
Yeah.
which literally means listen outside this house.
And what that may mean, of course, is a question that's better not put
Yeah.
to you at this
Yeah.
stage. I think if there aren't any more questions, then we might thank Sudarshan for agreeing to talk about his work, and thank you all.
And thank you, Abhi.
Thank you.
Thank you.